Hello everyone, and welcome to Milord Tutorials. In this video, we'll be talking about the difference between compiled versus interpreted languages. Let's begin. So, over here we have our created program. This can be in whatever language that we want, but let's say for the compiled language, we're going to do this in C, and for the interpreted language, we're going to be doing it in Python, since this is part of the Python series. So, for the created language, for the compiled language, I'll be drawing this in blue. The way that it, the way that the timeline goes is it goes from the user created program, which is easy to read for humans, to the compiler. And the compiler, all it really does is it takes that human readable code and translates it into machine code. And that machine code is what you would expect machine code really to be, which is the binary. So that's your zeros and ones, standing for on and off. And there's some intermediary steps that happen with the compiler, like it generates some object files, which is really kind of like an intermediary step from your compiler to the actual machine code, which is the object file, and then to your executable, which is your binary. For Windows, it's like a .exe file, and those ones gets generated after the whole process is done. But after you generate that exe file, you don't need to do anything else. All of the development code in this area doesn't necessarily need to be touched anymore. You can just take this exe file and give it to whoever it is, and they run it directly. All of the code is contained in that exe. It's not really the same for interpreted languages. So let's go over that part. From your created program, let's say Python, the interpreted language, all it really has is it has an exe file in there, which, well, this is speaking for Windows. For Linux and Mac, it's a little bit different. But if you look at when you download Python, you'll see that you have an executable file in there, and that executable file will really just take your program and read it line by line in order to translate whatever you wrote into whatever this executable understands, and spits out functions that the user can see. So really, it never gets boiled down into machine code at all. It kind of bypasses this layer. And so this is considered to have like a level of abstraction, where it actually separates the user from having to actually, well, separate the developer from actually having to use machine code. And really, one of the benefits to doing that is you can run it on different systems. So if I wrote something on my Windows with Python, I could give it to someone who's running Linux, and they can run that Python script. One of the downsides, though, is speed, which is one of the biggest arguments between using a compiled language versus an interpreted language, and there's actually been strides to fix that. But also, one of the kind of problems with interpreted languages is the fact that if you want to run that particular script, the other person has to have that Python executable. So if they don't have this executable, then they can't run the script. Lately, there's actually a lot of hybrid models out there where what it will do, it's an interpreted system in terms of it from your created program, it uses this exe file for the language to interpret what you read. However, it goes one step further and actually compiles right before actually executing it to the system. It compiles it so that it can run faster. So it has that benefit of the compiled language while still having that abstraction as the interpreted language. And these are your there's newer compilers out there called just-in-time compilers, and that's pretty much what they do. It's pretty interesting, but it now kind of blurs the line of this whole system. But in terms of Python, Python is an interpreted language, and that's pretty much it. There's a couple variations of that in terms of there's CPython and JPython, which is CPython it basically compiles the Python code into C and then runs C as your main program, and Jython is doing kind of the same thing. It's like Python and Java hybrid, but traditionally the main Python language is an interpreted language. So I just wanted to go over the difference between compiled and interpreted, and in the next video we'll be looking more towards the actual Python language, going over like the typical IDE or even the command line interface stuff, and just kind of going over how the scripting works and a little bit of stuff before we actually go into learning the code. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.